Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday Die Date. And today we're going to renovate. Do you see this stack of wool here turned on its side? It's suffering badly, even though it's beautiful. Many of the colors are the same value. I don't really have any darks. I have a lot of things in sections that are the same or very much the same. And what we're going to do today is we're going to renovate this stack so it's much more useful. And when people come into my place, they're going to be able to have the things that they need. So you can do this too. Even though you don't sell wool or you just have your own private and personal stack or stash, or you share one with someone else, we all get to this point where the deliciousnesses have been taken out, or we have duplicates of a lot of things, because this is just what happens to us naturally with color. We keep, even in the dye pots, gravitating to the same things over and over again. And we need to have variety. So I'm going to go through this stack and look for likely candidates. So let's look at these. They're dark, but they're not dark enough, but I will need this value. So I'm going to throw that to the side. I only have one like this, so I'm also going to keep it the way it is. Here's a dull one, highly needed. Also going to keep it, but now I've come upon a pair that are very much alike. One's just a little bluer than the other. So I'm going to take this blue one out and I'm going to turn it into a dark. I'm just going to keep on going through this stack. This is a lively and lovely guy, so we'll keep him the way he is. Let me see. This is very much like it, but there's only a little bit of it. So I'm also going to leave it in case somebody's making something and they need to use those two together. So now I'm into a situation where everything's quite a bit alike. And I'm still looking to make dark. So I'm going to take these two out, save this one, take this one out. You can see how I'm doing this. So this is a little weirdling. I'm probably going to over dye it and it's too short. I don't know what happened there, but I might just make it for something I want to use it for. This one is in the wrong pile. It doesn't even belong in there. That also happens to me. I think I'm going to save that one because of its modeling. I'm going to save this green one. And these two are very much alike. So one is duller and one is brighter. Often when this happens, you have to make a decision, and I want to keep them both because one of the problems is with us, we either have all dull colors or all bright colors, and I like there to be more balance. So this one's dull, also over there. I'm going to take these two and brighten them up. I have two sets of fairly dull ones and they're the same. I only need one of those. I'm going to put this one over here, put this one here to re-dye. I'm going to go through here more quickly now so that you don't die boredom. And just making a pile of things to renovate. I won't be able to renovate all of these today, but just to give you an idea of how you need to look at your own wools and make your decisions about what you need. And this comes with practice also. I'm going to take this one and do something with it. This is a regular practice I used to do more frequently when I had my studio at home because it was easier for me. These three are kind of interesting together, and I'm going to leave those two. So I'm going to go through with you what you can do. These I'm all going to leave because lights, right? So I want to go through with you that one of the things that helps me understand what needs to be changed is that I'm super organized, as you saw, strangely. Let me get rid of my tray here. I'm strangely organized because I like to see color in its proper array so that when I need something, I know where to go to get it. So all my wools range from dark to light, and I have the dulls and the brights interspersed in there where they belong. And in that way, I'm able to always know in an instant, just by looking where something is and also what it is I'm missing. So I'm going to turn the heat on here. So now we're going to do our renovations to improve these gaps and lacks that I have. So we're gonna go through how to brighten, how to dull, how to darken, and then there's always the question of the lights. So you can't make a light through actual renovation of another piece of wool because you would have to start with the lightest thing, which is the color of our wool already natural or white. And what I like to do is have some wool soaking in the sink that is just because of this color, I'm using white wool, not natural. And this way I can get some interesting lights. So let's start with one pot of making darks. Get these darks. So when you use Synthropol, it only takes a couple of seconds to wet wool. So I'm going to make 2 pans or 2 pots of two different darks. And these are so similar that I think I'm going to dull one also as I darken it. As I'm making a color family, my color thing just jumped in. My hand cleaner just jumped in the sink like it was a fish. Oh my. Okay, I'm putting these other wools out of the way so that I've got space to move here. So this pot's going to be darks, and I'm going to work with the mediums in this pot. You know, and I might switch them back and forth. It's no big deal. And now about colors. So I want to stay in my color family that I'm already in. Because this is a color unit that I'm trying to fix, I won't be making violets out of it or anything like that. I'm going to stick to my blue-green situation. So in my dyes, the Magic Carpet dyes, I have 2 blue-greens. One is turquoise and one is bottle green. So I'll be using these to darken my wool. So I already know, because I know all the colors of my dye, I highly recommend that you find out the colors of your dye by dyeing them 1/32 over 1/32 wool. I put 1/8 of bottle green in there. Bottle green is a very dark dye. And I'm going to put 1/16 of turquoise. Now I don't have this, I'm not going to write this down, and I don't have it written down, and it's not very important. And rather than have you write things down and try to capture what it is I'm doing, I think you should just watch. This is easy to do. You have to know what color your dyes are, though, or what value they are. So this is kind of a big piece of wool to put in this pot. It's a half yard, but there's nothing wrong with a little bit of this other color shining through too. It's original color. So I'm just going to put it in here. And I've adjusted the amount of water, so I'm not going to get too much overcast, I hope. And this is in the process of heating up. And now I want to look at my making some various types of mediums. So here I have a dull one. It's also a half yard. I'll get it wet. And I had many of these. So I am going to dull this one down. Okay, so I'm not going to use as much dye. And I have 2 choices. I can make a leaning of this color, which means I can do 2 things. One, I can add brown to it, which will turn it greener, because brown belongs to the yellow family, the yellow-orange family, or the orange family, or the orange-red family. All browns come from those color families. And when I do that, it leans it towards green. So let's take a look here. I think that I'm going to add reddish brown to this. That comes from the orange red family. I'm wetting this first because I just want to dip it in. I'm using it like I use my teaspoon. I don't want to use a whole lot because I don't want to shoot this beautiful color dead. I just want to make it a little bit dull so I have some variety for people when, for instance, they're making water and they need to have their water look muddy or have a trough or something like that. Now, if I wanted to make even more colors, I could divide this in half. Let's do that. Hey, now that I've given up my 20-minute dream, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm feel a little more free to go on these little gallivants we do. And I think it's important that we do that. This is my instinct speaking to me about things that I could try. And there's also not going to be any before and afters, although we saw the stack, and I will take a picture of the stack afterwards after these are added in, because it's kind of a revolution how your stack changes and how amazing it looks. Okay, let's get this heated up here. We'll get cooking. I don't know about you, but I don't know how your stash appears or what kind of things happens to it. But I think all of us get falling, I like to say, roll into the middle of the mattress. We're always kind of leaning towards the middle. And you saw how, you know, there were a few lights and there were a few darks, but mostly it was very homogeneous in the middle values. So this is just about all taken up. I haven't added acid yet. We'll be able to see the comparison between these two. And it's just going to be a little change. I don't have much dye in here, so consequently, I don't use much acid. That's how I always regulate my acid uses. How much dye do I have in any given pot? It could be, when I look at it, that I want to add a little bit more. I am going to add a little bit more, but this time I'm going to do it in my glass measuring cup, because I don't want to put a whole bunch of dye in one spot, because it'll just gravitate right into the wool immediately. And that's not what I want to have happen. I want to pour it over and stir it at the same time so that things are moving around properly and I don't get anything, don't get a bunch of splotches. You know, that's how we wander, right? So sometimes we want that. This time isn't one of them. Okay. And I can just use my eye and continually work at that until it's looking the way I want it to. And it's, like I said, it's really great that we have this comparison here. You can already see the difference. I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to let that take up. And if you want, you can always save out, like sometimes if a piece of wool has a salvage edge, which all mine do because I usually dye in a half yard or a quarter yard, I'm going to pull this off. So later when I over dye the other one, we can make a comparison as well. And you can do this too, so that you can see the changes you've made, because sometimes we add the dye in here and then we go, oh, did it even change? It doesn't look that different. But it's not until we put it against what it looked like originally that we can see it is quite different. I think by the tilt of that, I better get something under this leg here. I don't want that tipping over on me. That's an accident I don't need today. Have boiling water poured on me. Oh my, what a time, what a time. Okay. So today I was looking at halibut or hailstones and halibut bones, and I found this great poem at the end, and I'm going to read it to you while we wait here. The colors live between black and white in a land that we know best by sight, but knowing best isn't everything, for colors dance and colors sing and colors laugh and colors cry. Turn off the lights, the colors die, and they make you feel every feeling there is, from the grumpiest grump to the fizziest fizz. And you and I know well, each has a taste, each has a smell, and each has a wonderful story to tell. Isn't that great? She has such a good book. I was sad though, because I was hoping that she would have something about blue-green, and she didn't. So she better get to work. She needs to cover all the in-betweens. So this color is getting nice and dark. Normally, you know, I really get adding acid to these things, but I'm going to be gentle this time because I don't want any white pouring happening. It wouldn't be white because it's already a color, but I'm just going to be gentle with my acid use today. And if we have to end when we're ending and you can't see everything, I'm sorry. Which brings me to the fact that that's one of the benefits of belonging to the welcome mat. the dye date runs long and we have to stop, you can go there and see what happened. Because I show an after, and I have a lot of aftercare too, where you can ask me questions that you think about later, or you can show me what you dyed, which is wonderful. I love seeing that. Okay, so I declare this done. And although I brought my tray, Bonnie, believe it or not, Bonnie told me yesterday, Wanda, you better bring your tray, and I did, but it's in the other room. I'm telling you, I'm destined to dry trayless. There's no help for it. Okay, so there's that beautifully renovated color. Isn't it lovely? So I have a little bit of dye left in that pan. Let's see if I can make myself a light. So because I'm heating this up, there is a little bit of color come out, and this is very hot, and it ordinarily wouldn't come out in the normal scheme of things. But I'm going to be able to get a little bit of interesting, ooh, a very beautiful light here. And you can see this is how I manufacture my lights from this renovation too. It's very cool how this happens. Okay, let's take a look at this guy in here. I'm going to see how much dye is left, because these dark pans, it's very hard to tell. There's still quite a bit, and it hasn't really heated up because I didn't get it going beforehand. So it's just slowly heating up. And when it gets to its proper heat, it's probably going to take up pretty quickly. And also, if I found that I wasn't thinking there was enough in this pot, I'll just borrow from this one. And I can put some of that in there too. It's pretty handy having the two different pots going. This is really how I dye at home, except on the stove with 4 big giant soup pots, I guess they're called. I don't know what else to call them. And I'm often trading and borrowing and dipping one into another and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And that's why I end up getting such unique colors. I don't know if you knew this, but the whole time I wrote for Rug Cooking Magazine, that was 1/32 of acid I put in there because I didn't put much in before and it had exhausted. I never ever use my own dye formulas. It's not part of my dyeing function. So I made those recipes for individuals to use, although I know people make them and sell them, but they're not really supposed to do that. But that's okay. We can't control that, and it doesn't matter one bit. But I don't have the colors that I make for you because I don't dye in that formulaic way. This is how I dye. But I love making colors for you to use, though. I think it's great, and it really is a good exercise for me. Next week, I'll be coming out with a new bunch of colors for this month. So I'm happy and excited about making them. One of the things I have to be really careful about too is not keep making the same colors over and over again, because we all have that tendency. So I usually like to take an inspiration of, like, I cut up a magazine a little while ago, so I would have several inspirations. The last one I did in bloom was a painting, and this one I'm going to do, this coming one, is a painting too, although it's very different, very differently colored. So here's my beautiful light, and I'm looking over at my lights, and I don't have one that's exactly like that, so that's great. All right, so let's look. I also am sort of having problems having colors leading up to dark. So I don't really have anything that's sort of the value between very dark and what I've got going on here. So I'm going to try to make that right now. This time I'm going to use turquoise. It's my old turquoise, which when you buy turquoise on Wanda Works, you're still getting this turquoise, not for very much longer, but you still can now. So I'm going to use 1/4 teaspoon of turquoise. This wool is already a little bit dull, and I'm going to assess its dullness when when I get it going. And I also have to be careful because I do have a tendency, as we all do, to keep making the same value over and over again. And we're dealing with two things. We're dealing with the dyes that we're using, and we're also dealing with the value the wool already was. So each one of them has a value that they're bringing to the table. So when you look at this, you can see these are looking remarkably similar, but this one's almost done its dye process, and this one has just begun its dye process. So I don't have to worry. Just a little bit more. I think I'm going to pop the lid on this guy. Doesn't appear like he's getting full on support of his, there. Wasn't getting his full electricity. So let's say that I wanted to change something about this, that I wanted to turn it a little greener than it is. Let's just imagine that, because it doesn't matter. All wool is good wool. Let me see, I'm gonna borrow some water from this guy. I'm gonna add smallest amount of yellow to it. Now I can be more gentle and make this movement not so abruptly by using chocolate brown, but I'm gonna use yellow because I don't wanna dull it down either. I love having a dark, bright. So this is why I'm choosing to use the head of the family rather than one of the old dull uncles, which chocolate brown would be. So this is hot water. You saw me get it out of the other container, and wisely, I should not pour this on here. Now, if I want to have these interesting green spots appear, indeed I should. If I want it to make an overall change that's subtle, I really need to add some cold water to this, thin it out, I guess you'd say, color-wise, dilute it somewhat, and then just gently add this in so that any color change that's happening is getting amalgamated instead of into splotches. And I'll wait for that to take up and see if I'd like to do that again, because it's always better to start gently than it is to make a big booming change, especially if you're a new dyer and you don't have very good control to begin with. I always tell people you can always do it again, but you cannot take it away. You know, you cannot take it away. But I like to tell people it's super great if you just take a piece of wool like this and just infinitely change it, like a little bit, 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 because, and see the interactions. And you can end up with a beautiful piece of, you know, interesting, almost black, but you've gone through this great journey where you made all these discoveries about, oh, what happens when I do this? What happens when I do that? And you can have a real adventure over just 1/2 a yard. One thing you could do to keep a chronicle of it too is, like, I ripped off this little strip. So you can rip off a little strip every time with every change you make and have a good record of the adventure you had. That is a good color education in dyeing, I have to tell you, to do that. As always, when we're dyeing dark colors, it takes longer and patience is needed. So I'm going to take an assessment of how much dye is left in this pot, which is a fair amount, but I feel, as I did before, that I want to add yellow one more time because I want to make a real difference to it. While we were not looking, somebody ate the yellow dye. I couldn't find it there for a second. There's a lot of gremlins in this studio. I'm going to do exactly the same thing over again, except this time I took water from its own pot. And just because I'm keeping the lid on this guy. Once again, adding cold water. And stirring and adding. So one of the things I have to be careful now. One of the reasons I did take water from here is because when I had to turn that guy down because he was bubbling up, he has his lid on him and he thought he was gonna go over the side. Every man for his own, jump over the side. So goodness knows what I was saying now. This bubbling pot made me lose my train of thought. If anybody wants to open up their microphone and remind me, I'd be glad of it. You know what I was saying about this pot? Did you all go to sleep? I can understand if you did. This is a quiet dyeing session.
You're adding a little bit more yellow.
Yeah, I added a little bit more yellow to this one because I wanted to see a real change. Thank you, Catherine. And it's looking good. And I'm going to add more acid now because, of course, this is a dark color and it needs more acid than what is already present. So I'm going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon of acid and give that a little stir. All right, so let's say that I feel content and happy about this color and it's kind of sitting right between my two dark ends, which I did not throw down on the floor, so I could take a look at them. This guy, he's as dark as the darkest one I have, but truly I would do this again if we weren't in the Friday dye show, because I want to be able to have this be even darker, but I don't want to spend our time doing that. We only have 2 pots. If I had 3 pots going, I would do it. So I would double down and put that much dye on it again. And will after we're done. Because what I'm looking for is having a dark unto black, that it's almost as dark as black. Because we need those colors. Like imagine if I was making some mud. How wonderful would it be to have that streak of turquoise in that mud right now? You know, the one that I just made here in this pot. And I want us to always be thinking about that, to adding unexpected color. This guy's getting really bubbly too. Everybody's very enthusiastic today, but it's because I've been added extra water to this one. So we always want to be conscious of that when we're adding dye, we're adding extra water. This is why I try to take it out of the pot so it doesn't get to be bubbly and over boiling. All right. Let's take this guy out. And let's make something that we all need and rarely can have. And this is the best way to do it too. Okay, you can go in here. I'm being more careful with that piece of wool because it's a half yard and it can get ungainly on the end of the spoon. I want to make the elusive rabbit called a dull light. It's so hard to make. I'm going to use black this time. I did pick up chocolate brown, but I changed my mind because this is a cool color and the chocolate will just turn it. Whoops. Oh boy, everybody's getting so excitable. Here, we'll take this lid off and it'll simmer down. Do you know the origin of that word? It actually simmers down, right? All right, so I'm going to take black and I'm just going to add a tiny amount. Now you might want to check and see how much dye is left in here. I'm going to add a tiny bit of black to it to dull it down, maybe a tiny bit more. So I just wiped it through my fingers so that I could get any excess dripping water off of it because I have good clothes on today. Normally I'd be wiping down my clothes, but not today. Okay, so let's put this in here. And as of course, all things can be changed even after we put the wool in. Put it in there. Ooh. So this is going to make a beautiful doll about number 2 value or number 3 value. That's really beautiful. I'll show you in a second. Look at that. That's something everybody needs if they want to make a sky. And believe it or not, this is not the bottom of the sky. Bottom of the sky is almost always white. Speaking of the sky, It's filled with big giant snowflakes today. We just had a snow squall warning for this area. It wasn't expected. I don't know what's going on out there, but we don't care because we're in here happy in our dye, happy in our pots. Has everybody understood what I've said to this point? Now I'm going to brighten a color as soon as I take this out. If you have any questions, we're going to have a question period right soon. And sometimes it happens that I'll do this and I'll put this over in the sink and it'll look exactly like the guy I just put in there. Luckily that time it didn't, but when that happens to me, I don't get upset. I just go, oh, you're just going to go back in there and you're going to be something and do something else. This time I'm going to make a bright out of a piece of wool, and you make a bright by adding more dye and even more dye. So I'm not going to add bottle green because bottle green is dark and it'll darken down whatever I'm doing. This will make it darker too, but it'll be bright. So I'm going to use like 1/8, a heaping eighth. We're going to get one of these pieces of wool that is already leaning towards brightness. It's the
Wanda,
brightest-
was that turquoise that you just put in or black?
turquoise. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I want to make a bright color now. So
Okay.
I'm going to use turquoise because it's bright. And if I add black, it'll dull it down. And I'm picking a piece of wool that is the brightest piece of wool I have. It's kind of dulled down a little bit, but I'm just going to show you if you need to renovate and make some brights, pick the brightest wool you have to do that. Because if I took a piece that was really gray, I couldn't ever make it act brightly because the gray would just overcome the turquoise. So this is how you make a bright, by adding just even more of that dye that you have added there. Right, so if it's in my turquoise family, my blue-green family, I'm going to add the brightest blue-green dye I have, and the one that is the clearest, if that makes any sense. So bottle green is greener and it's darker and it's a little bit dirtier. It's really good to know what your dyes are, because if you understand what color they are in the jar, it really allows you a lot of movement around, right? You know what to do. Let's see how this light guy is coming along. Well, I mean, I couldn't have, I guess I could have, but I couldn't have made a better color if I had tried, and it was through no effort. And I really want you guys to start thinking about your dye pots like that. Oh, here's the lid. I'm telling you. Maybe I should start doing this on Mondays when I might be bright and fresh, because I wouldn't be forgetting what I'm doing. And by going through the things you already have, you're not spending any money. You're working with what you already have. Like so many times I've had people say to me, I mean, I have some pretty nice colors from away selling wool. A lot of people feel like, well, I want a lot, but I can't because I have to use up all the wool that I have. And they're stuck then because perhaps they no longer need or want those colors or even like them anymore. And they're trapped in this prison of, but I can't spend any money because I got to use this wool up. But this way, it's infinitely changeable. I mean, if I wanted to, I could turn all my colors and all my wool stacks in a different color today. Every single thing. It would probably take me 24 hours or 48, but I could change them all. And it's that way for you too. And it doesn't matter if you have textures, if things are in fancily dyed. You know, sometimes you've ordered something, you tell somebody, oh, throw me in something unusual, and they send you something and you want to bark because it's so horrifying. You know, you can just change that. You're not stuck with it. That's the great thing. I always tell people, I'm so glad I'm not a green grocer, because they just have to throw out their stuff that goes bad. And mine never goes bad. It can just infinitely be something else. You know, it's like being a baker. Oh, didn't sell the loaf, you make croutons. Didn't sell the croutons, you make breadcrumbs. It's good. Yeah. So let's go to question period. And I'm just going to run through quickly, and I'll have this written out in our discussion too before we go to question period. I try to, in each value of wool that I have, if I'm really selling a lot of wool. So every value you'd have a dull one, a bright one. And so that, and leans, so maybe one would lean a little bit to green in this circumstance, or one would lean a little bit to blue, so that I have all these amazing varieties within any single value. So if you want to brighten your renovation, you need to just add more of your brightest dye in that color family. If you want to dull it, you add black if it's a cool color, and you add brown if it's warm. If you need to darken it, add even more dye, and now look for your darker dye in that color family, and add black too, which will also dull it if you want. If you need to have a bright dark, you will want to not add black. You will want to just add more dye, more dye, more dye, and try to look for your darker dye in that family. Lights, you saw how wonderful it is to just use the leavings. And to make a leaning, you add a color to either side of your color, or you can also add the opposite color. So if I wanted to make a leaning, I could add orange over here, and we already know from our past experiences what happens when you use orange and blue green. It turns it a little bit greener. So that's another way you can do it too. So let's have some questions.
I have a question.
Anyone?
Rhonda.
Yes,
It's
love.
Kathy.
Hi, I love when you guys tell me who you are too. I do recognize some of you. I love knowing who I'm talking to. Thank you.
Okay, it's about the browns.
Yeah.
So reddish brown clearly leans towards the red,
Yeah. Mhm.
and
Yep.
chocolate brown leans towards yellow,
Yes, it does. Mhm.
and seal brown.
Brown is a neutral brown. It is yellow, but it's lacking in temperature compared to the other two. Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
Which one did you
And
say?
it's dark, Catherine, it's darker.
You're talking about seal brown now, right?
I am. Mhm.
Okay, it's Nora.
Yeah, hi Nora. Yeah, seal brown is sort of neutrally, and it also neutrally temperatured, and it's also darker than the other two browns.
okay.
Yeah.
You have,
Wanda, it's Jennifer. Oh, I'm sorry.
Jennifer, hi.
Hi. I dyed some wool this morning. Just I'm doing that landscape, and I wanted to dull down my peachy kind of colors from the sky for the water.
Yes,
So
dear.
I used seal brown, but they're both warm colors. So like peach, and so it didn't turn out the way I hoped. So
No, steel brown is a heavy hammer. I would have used chocolate.
chocolate. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And my second question is,
I just tell you why. It's
Yes.
because it's a dark color, and when you have a light and delicate color like peach or yellow, it's a real hammer to knock it with.
okay. I thought
Yeah.
chocolate brown would be worse, so that's why I use seal, but
Yeah, it's interesting because this is the problem for us, Jennifer, and it happens to everybody. We don't know what's in those dye jars.
yeah.
So therefore, we're just kind of going by guess and by golly. Like, it's if I never cook Italian food and I didn't understand spices, I wouldn't understand that, probably put, I don't know, cumin in it, right? Because that's going to turn my sauce into Texas chili. It's like, that's exactly what's happening to us. We're just guessing. And if you wanted to do yourself the happiest and greatest of favors, which I want you to do for yourself, Jennifer, you should dye samples of all your colors so you understand how dark they are compared to one another. So you keep an even measure. You take 1/32 of dye and you dye over 1/32 of wool, and you use all the same wool for all of the samples so that nothing changes. Like, you don't use white over some and use whatever that other kind, the natural with another. Just keep everything as uniform as possible, like be really scientific about it. And that's going to get you a better understanding of what to use.
Okay.
If that makes sense. You can always
Yeah.
ask me, you can always say, oh, what should I use?
Well-
It might have been interesting, given what you were wanting to have happen, to make a dye bath that was, cold. So take your dye, make it hot, but add it to the cold dye bath. So, you know, you dilute it in hot water, else it won't dissolve. And I probably, given what the scene is you're making, I might have added blue violet, actually, just the smallest amount, and let it just overcast it. And then I would have removed it from that pot and put it in another pot when it got to be the color I wanted, or to have the effect I wanted of a reflection at night, at dark. And that's what you need, right? So probably all that happened with the seal brown is you just got some interesting, you know, weird oranges, country oranges, and yeah. So that would have helped.
I have a question, Wanda.
Yeah.
It's Diana.
Hi, Diane.
Hi. When I want to experiment starting to make blacks with different colors running through them, so they
Yeah.
would be at least noticeable. So you go,
Yeah.
oh, that's pretty. How do you start to, you know, just play with these different colors with black? I mean, is there
Well,
like,
You need to make a spot dye, and you need to dye like really intense colors all over a piece of wool, and then
yeah.
put very heavy black over it, and
Oh, yeah.
then put it in the oven, and then you'll see your colors appear amongst your black.
I can't do it in my Presto pot?
No, but you can do it in a crock pot.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, it's a situation where you don't want anything touched. So this pot is a hot pot. And the crock pot can act more like an oven where you have all over surrounding heat
Nice.
and low, and you don't touch it, and you're going to get that nice effect. So you would
So what do
put, this is how I would do it. So I would have a color in the bottom, and I would put 1/4 of my wool in there and scrunch it all up, depending on how big your crock pot is. You can actually dye a whole yard in one if it's big enough. And then I would pour black over that, and I would fold in another part of it, another 1/4 of it, and I would put another color on it. And then fold in another, pour black over that, fold in another color, black over that, fold another piece in. That's how I would do it. And I would not touch that.
But now when you're saying folding, does that mean that the material is outside of the pot and you're bringing
Yep.
it in?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
like
Yep.
just, okay, you're layering a lasagna. Okay,
Yep.
so, okay,
And
well,
you can break the pieces up too if you want to. And you can also, if you want, add other already colored wools in there as well. You don't have to do it by adding colors to it. You can take wool that's already brightly colored and do that and pour black over
right.
it.
And what about the oven? What temperature do you usually have your oven at?
Just like I'm making cookies, 375 or 350.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, all right.
Yeah, and you want to watch that though, because it can get dried out and it takes a real long time to make a dark color in the oven. So it doesn't happen as quickly as you think it might. You can even raise the heat too. I sometimes
So
raise
that
the
would
heat,
be, that would
Make it
be
a-
with, I'm
but
sorry.
you got to be careful that you don't, you keep enough water in there. I've never had it happen to me, but people have had it happen to them where all the water's just dissipated, but because they
So
didn't
the
add enough
crock
water.
pot, the crock pot would be the same. You'd put it on high, not low, right? Or,
Depends on how long you want it to take. If you want
Yeah.
it to go all day, you could just leave it on low. It'll be fine. It will never dry out. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Well, I'd like to have it sometime during the week, you know, I'm just with the crock pot, you know.
No, the crock pot, it would only take probably 5 hours or something on low.
Oh, okay.
Not be taking the lid off. This is a no touch proposition. This is do not touch. Don't look, don't poke, don't touch.
Oh, God forbid.
And then-
Okay.
God forbid. And if you do that, then it's going to take even longer.
Because
And
you're letting it heat out. Okay.
yeah, of course. And if you take it out and you don't like the look of it, you can just put it in a dye pot with more black if you want, or more color, or whatever you think you want to have happen. So you have to just be playful. But spot dye or this layering technique, that's the way to get that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. In the welcome at someplace, I'll try to link it to this thing if I remember. I have a bad memory today. I have this place where I think it's called Dyeing Delicious Darks, or it could be called something else, but I have these spot dyes. One's called Jupiter's Ore, AUR, and Aurora, I think the other one's called, and they are blacks with colors showing through. So it tells you
And
how to do it.
They're in the rug hooking magazine?
They might be, but I wouldn't know what one, but they are definitely on the welcome mat, and that is searchable.
Okay.
That is,
Okay, so I put in what to search it?
I'll just search it and attach it to the aftercare of this.
Oh,
I'll do-
okay.
And if I don't, you tell me, hey, you liar.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So as we're having these questions, I am adding more things into this just to be productive. Does anybody else have anything they want to ask me?
This is Michelle.
Yes, Michelle, how are you today?
Good.
Good.
It always seems like turquoise takes forever.
Oh, that's just because there's a whole bunch of different turquoises available for people who make dyes. And some of them need a high acid level. And you just have to add a lot of acid, like, I don't know, maybe 2 teaspoons or a whole tablespoon. And so that's all that's happening. It just needs a high acid situation. Now, conversely, there are some dyes that if you add too much acid, they won't take up. So this old saw we have of adding more acid doesn't work with every color, but that's what turquoise needs.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you also don't have to worry about it necessarily. It's probably not going to affect your overall outcome. And you can just let it be in the dye pot. I like to use it as a starter. When I used a long time ago, when I was using Prochem dyes, I would just let that turquoise be the starter for something, the next thing, if that makes any sense. I just let it be used up. So as I'm speaking to you guys, I'm just using up the residual dye and making some more lights. And I'm pretty happy with how these lights are turning out. And it's hard to make lights and have them have any sort of calmness to them, because it's hard to make a formula with teeny amounts of dye. Does anybody else have any questions today?
Yes, it's Nora.
Hi, Nora.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I'm concluding from watching you that
That's always dangerous, Nora.
okay, that's why I'm asking, that if I've tried to dye something and there's still, I've dyed something, there's still some color in the water, but I've been adding citric acid, it doesn't mean that that the dye isn't going to be set in the fabric.
Can I just reiterate and say that question a different way and see if I understand what you're saying?
Okay.
So what you're saying is if there's residual dye left in this pot and I have added acid, that I should not keep adding acid. Is that what you're saying?
Not quite, although it might be,
Right.
because what I'm trying to figure out is, I guess I've always thought you had to get all the color into your fabric. And if you've been adding citric acid or whatever acid and it's not gone in, then it's because it's not like that, there's something you need to do more because it's still not all gone in. But you're taking it out before it's finished absorbing all the color. You're happy with the color. And so I guess you're saying also that whatever is in the color that you've absorbed into the wool is going to set. It's set.
Oh, yeah. These are both in an acid bath.
Yeah.
This is both acidic. Some weeks when I'm having Friday dye date, I just have a clear bath. It's just acid and water, and I'll toss something in there because something will get to a color I like and I throw it out. I don't wait for it all to take in because I like how it looks. So I'm not going to wait. But there is an exception to that rule. Yellow is an exception to that rule. Frequently, people can't make it take up and they keep adding acid. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. It's very low acid color and you add acid to it, it retards its take up. And so this is why people will be just adding acid after acid after acid, trying to get yellow to take up. And really what they need to do is raise their temperature and put a lid on their pot and walk away. You come back and that'll all be taken up. So it needs very low acid, but a high heat. So the lid helps that. And I do it at a boil and then just walk away from it, and it takes up beautifully. And I will often say to people, like, does that happen to you in the oven when you make a spot dye? And they say, no, it always takes up. And that's because the oven can get far hotter than pots. So if we're cooking on the stove, we can never make anything as hot as we can make it in the oven. Because boiling is boiling, and we can't do anything more about that unless we use a pressure cooker. So even just putting the lid on this, and this has a temperature gauge that allows it to go up to 400, I can do better than I can do on my stove. So in these Presto pots, as far as having a real intense heat. So it all is depending on what the dye is. And there's 3 kinds of dyes that we use, and we're never, normal people aren't privy to what kind of dyes they are that we're even using. And they all take a different acidity level. And this is why the amount of acid we use for a certain color has to change. So I forget the number that turquoise is for Procam, but you have to use a lot of acid for it, or it just won't take up. Just won't. But, and it doesn't matter that it doesn't, because it doesn't indicate anything that the water's not clear. But you'll know when, if you read my dye articles in Rug Cooking Magazine, I'm always saying to you, until the water clears, right? Because that is standard, that's industry standard. But over here, because I'm dyeing in this ad hoc way, you know, I have some residual dye come out in this rinse water because I took it out before it was done, but I rinsed that very well in Synthropol. So there's no chance at all of it coming out afterwards. Like when somebody buys it and it's in their rug, if this turquoise is beside a white snowy field, it's not going to come out into the snowy field when they steam it, for instance. So I hope
Right.
that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. It does answer it. Although I also noticed that you don't cook it for an hour either, which is often what you read is what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
I don't want to be controversial, but I'm just going to be. Okay, so people tell us that shit because they're trying to keep their behinds covered. And they felt that that gave it time to strike and that all the dye would be in there and it would be the way it should be. But that's not the way dyes work. And I know I had an instinct for that before I owned a dye company. And now that I own the dye company, I'm privy to lots of other chemical and other interesting information. When the dye, if the water is cleared or the color is the color you want, so let's just say the water's cleared, it's sitting in there for another hour. It's going to make no difference to fading. This is what they were trying to prevent. Our dyes that we use in a kitchen are not light fast. And we don't want to use dyes that are light fast because they're extremely dangerous. These are wash fast dyes, meaning if we wash this, the color is going to stay in it, but they're not light fast. And there's nothing we can do about that. I'm always encouraging people, if you want your rug to fade out gracefully, the colors that you use should be more intense than you actually desire. Because over time, no matter what we do, nothing will prevent this. Not cooking it for an hour or 2 hours or 900 years is going to make the color stay in there because they're not light fast. And it's to different degrees. Everyone knows who's a dyer in any field that if you have blue violet has a tendency to fade out. If you have blue, it has a tendency to fade out quickly. And that's just a fact of our lives. So I'm always telling people, go brighter and it'll have a longer time to mellow out. So yes, that's why they tell you that, but it doesn't work. So why waste your time? That's how I feel about it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and though people will fight you, like arm wrestle you to the ground over this, and they can say whatever they like, and I just tell them, you do whatever makes you feel better, because that's what it comes right down to. It doesn't make any difference to your wool. It's sad, isn't it, that we're wasting all that time? But anyway, that's the end of the controversy. Has anybody else got any questions?
I have a question, Wanda.
Here.
Just a minute. Just a minute, Shawnee, because I think Catherine just.
It's Catherine. It's a quick one. So I was over dyeing. It was very pale pink and I wanted blue violet. And so I used blue violet dye, which I knew in my mind that maybe it wasn't going to work out. And it didn't, because it turned into red violet because it was over pink.
Right.
Pale
Right, so
pink. So,
you could have just added blue to that and it would have,
yeah,
a little bit of
Yeah.
turquoise, would have canceled that out and you would have been ducky again.
okay,
Yeah.
blue or turquoise?
Yeah.
Okay, I might run that through again. Thanks.
Yeah, does everybody know that, for instance, if I run out of blue dye, what a catastrophe that would be, that I can use blue, violet, and turquoise and it makes blue,
Oh, okay.
and that's all the
Oh.
way around the color wheel.
Oh,
Yeah,
you have an overdying chart that you sell, correct?
I do, and it is a digital piece of information because if it's printed out, the colors aren't very accurate.
Yeah.
So it's digital and people can just have it on their iPads and it's super great. It doesn't have anything to do with any dye company. It just has to do with what happens when your wool's this color. And I think I have like 6 or 7 colors and you over dye it with these other 12 or 14 different colors. And it's a chart that you can look at. Mhm.
That would be a good place for me to start. Yeah.
Super great place, but that little trick that you just had happens to a lot of people, but it's infinitely amendable. So if it feels too red violet, you just look at the color wheel. You already added blue violet, so you know that's not going to correct it. So you just add the next thing to the blue violet, which is blue.
Blue. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, may I ask a question?
That's my question.
Okay, I'm gearing up to dye all these greens and golds for my pond project. And I'm starting to look at them, I'm trying to figure out how to dye the colors for the reflection, to make
Right.
them look duller. So
I
I'm
don't
looking
have to worry about that, Johnny, because here's my advice, that you go ahead and hook your, you start hooking at the front of your project and work your way back, leave your reflection where it is, just leave it blank. And when you're all done hooking your trees and everything, just give everything a little bath in chocolate brown and whatever's left over, and it's tickety-boo. Don't try to prepare ahead of time. It's gonna make a better reflection if you use what you use in your trees and then just calmed it down with some chocolate brown. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does that sound good? I like to press the E button.
All right, thank you.
What you should do for fun if you hook with other people is just fill it up with like reds and like lime green and all this kind of stuff. If you want to hold the area open, it's really fun because they won't understand what you're doing and they'll go, why is that like that? And it really sends them on a real trip, right? Yes, I am one of those people who go to a hooking class with me. You get up and go to the bathroom and you're hooking a house, you come back, there's fire coming out of the window. Like, I just love playing tricks like that. It's fun. So, did anybody else have a question? Marianne, I saw you pop up. Do you have a question for me today?
No, I just kind of the basic one. How much Centropol do you put in your water when you're soaking it? Just a
yeah.
drop or two, or?
Well, I have it in a squirt bottle,
Okay.
so I'll just squirt it out for like 3 seconds or so.
Okay.
But normally during my dye practice, like right now over here, I probably have like 3 yards in there of varying pieces. I might have more actually. I think I probably have 4. And I just squirted it out for like 1, 2, 3. That's it.
Okay.
I don't measure it. Last week, Nadine had a great question. She asked me afterwards, 1 pot all foamed up. And that was because I had an excess of Centropol in the water because I was worried about it getting wet quickly. And it just foams up when you put it in the pot, but it's no big deal. It's easily simmered down. Yeah. Any other questions today?
Jennifer here.
Yes, Jennifer.
If you take wool that's dyed and you know it's dark enough and you don't want it to take up any more color and you pull it out, I only had 1 pot going, so I had to start a second pot. And do you have to bring that to the boil with the acid before you add it in, or?
No, you can raise up, just as long as it's the only piece of wool in there.
Okay.
So if you like, I know this, you guys, this sounds disgusting, but this is how I do it. So it's a bit like laundry when I dye. I start with yellows and I start with the lightest things and I work my way through the color wheel. So at first I'll have the light yellows on the bottom and then I'll be piling up darker and darker and darker ones. And I'll put the lid on and let that all process while I get ready to do my next color. And then I just take them out one by one. I add new water, new acid, and it's always sort of just always on the boil. but I have to continually during the day. I know you guys aren't dying like this, but I have to add acid and I have to add new water all the time. But if it happens to get a little clunky with other colors, like let's say I was dyeing blue and I skipped over to blue violet, it might be that it wouldn't be because blue gets taken up instantly, but let's pretend. There's some blue left in there, or some of the blue violet might go onto the blue wool. I don't worry too much about that. I kind of enjoy those little inventions that happen. But yes, you want that pot to be boiling. And I always find it good to take wool from one pot and put it in a pot of equal temperature.
Yeah.
If that happened to you, it makes no difference.
Okay, thanks.
It's all good. We don't.
Hi, Rhonda's Beverly here.
Hi, Beverly.
I was wondering, like I was shifting around on YouTube and came across a dyeing class. And in it, she said that if you took your Centropol, your best bet is to fill up a 4-liter bottle and put it in it. Is that something you would do or not?
Girl, I am a weakling. I do not want to be hefting up a 4-liter bottle. Why would I dilute this when it's perfectly great?
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
I think I wasted my Centropol
Well,
by
it's still
doing that.
good. Yeah, it's still good. Your Centropol is active and it will still work, but you have to heft up and carry around this big, look at me.
Yeah.
I can just, probably go lightly. I have what I need and I don't have to have this big storage area. That was one of the reasons I switched to citric acid too, because, come to my house and my house is not big and it's taken up with like 19 jugs of vinegar. No, we don't need to dilute it. That doesn't make any sense because we're already putting it in water. It's not like we're going to drink it, right? We don't need to dilute it. It's good. I'm glad you asked the question. I do have to say too, there is so much old wives' tale craziness about dyeing. I just can't get over it. It's so thick, I cut it with a knife. It's just so crazy. Why are people making things so hard? I do not know. Anyway, thanks for telling us about that. I'll be writing that one. Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions?
Do you sell Synthropol?
I do, but it's expensive to ship because it weighs so much. So I sell it in an 8-ounce thingy-doodle, just like this. Yeah.
Because I don't think, I always hear you can't get it in Canada. I haven't really looked for it, but.
Well, you can't get it. You can, but it costs a lot.
Amazon carries it too.
Yeah, you can definitely get it. And it comes in different strengths too. And it comes in sudsing and non-sudsing. And yeah, it's very good. But if you don't have it, I just want you to know its chemical composition is the same as jet dry. So you can just use jet dry, and you can also use shampoo that doesn't have conditioner in it. And it works perfectly great. It's all the same stuff, believe it or not.
Good to know.
You don't actually need it, but this is stronger and it acts more quickly, but only by 30 seconds. So, and if you do get jet dry, you want to make sure that you don't have baking soda in it, or some of them are sold with bleach in them and different additives. Just get the plain, cheap, regular, old dishwasher agent, right? A sheeting agent, because it does the same thing. It makes water wetter than wet. As cute as that saying is. Yeah, that was a good question too. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hi, it's Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi. If I was going to do the experiment with to see what my dyes look like with yarn, how much yarn do I use?
It doesn't matter as long as you use the exact amount every time. So maybe you want to do an ounce, and maybe you want to use 1/64.
Okay.
Or half an ounce and 1/64. I'm not sure, Ellen. I can investigate it because I'm very poor with mathematics. And I would have to measure out an ounce of yarn and look at it. And then I'd be able to tell you in an instant. So why don't I do that and add it to the class? I hope somebody's keeping notes of what I'm supposed to do in this follow-up today.
We'll keep you honest.
You keep me honest. Oh, thank goodness. I'm
You
so
could
great.
just, sorry, you could just weigh 32nd of wool, no? And then you'll know how much
You
1/32.
could. They don't always equal out, Nora. So,
Okay.
you know, like well, if Ellen had like a hard twist yarn, which she probably wouldn't want to use that because it won't be very receptive to the dyes and it won't really, yeah. So I'm going to use a certain kind of yarn and I'll show about that because not all yarn is equal, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah.
My own, so it's definitely
Global
not,
flannel isn't equal. Pardon me, Ellen?
I said I make my own yarn, so it's definitely not equal.
Yeah, exactly. And I can hand spin some up too, and just so we can get an equal understanding of what's going on. Okay, so I'll do that for you today. I'm gonna be happy about that actually. So does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask me? No? Okay.
Oh,
That's
okay.
great.
Can I just, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Oh,
Hello. How are you?
Hi. Just going back to the shampoo.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Synthropol. I do use Synthropol, and funnily enough, we can get it quite easily here. So shampoo without conditioner. So you can use that as a wet aid, and also rinsing. Does it hold the dye
Yeah.
when you're rinsing it as well?
It'll help you. Well, you don't want it to keep the dye in. You want to rinse out your wool when you're done with Synthropol because you do want any unadhered particles to escape. So it seems like, oh shit, I didn't all take in, but every time we dye, there's some unadhered dye particles. So even if our water is clear and we did it for an hour, if people rinsed it out with Synthropol or shampoo or jet dry, they would see some color come out. And we want to do that. We want to make sure that all the color in it is in it. Right? So that's an important thing to do. And it'll work with all of those things. I find the cheapest shampoo is the best. That's I always tell people.
Yeah, I think years ago I used to use shampoo, and then you get sucked in.
I know. I have Synthropol. I use jet dry for many years, and I have Synthropol for my dye kits because I like people to start off with what's proper, and then we can do whatever we want after that. Right? Whatever works.
Yeah, because the Synthropol is quite expensive, so do use it sparingly. But I also use a liquid clothes washing liquid.
Yep. So I disagree with the use of the liquid soaps such as dish soap or clothes soap because it's not made for hair, and basically that's what wool is. So it will work a lot more quickly. So you have to, people used to say, use, what do you guys call it? Fairy something?
Fairy liquid. It's for washing dishes. Yeah.
For washing. Yeah. So that doesn't always work very well. You'll often have parts of the wool that don't get wet.
Yeah.
So even if you soak it all night, but if you use shampoo because it's meant to make hair wet to get the surfactants on it, then boom, it wets very quickly.
That was another thing. We used to use shampoo, and then the dyes, some of the dyes that I buy here, he was a dyer, scientific chappie who worked for ICI, and he said to use this liquid, clothes washing liquid, and it does wet stuff quite quickly. It is, so I've kind of stuck with that.
Yeah, well, Erin, you have what you have. For us, I say a hard hell no.
So actually the shampoo is even cheaper.
Yeah,
so that's the way to go. And then
in a good dispensing bottle, usually it's quite handy.
Oh yeah. So oh well, that's good.
All right.
Thank you for that.
So if everybody's good and we have no more questions, I'm going to wind it up for today and just remind you, if you're not a subscriber to the Welcome app, please subscribe. This is how this happens, is because my subscribers support me. And also wandaworks.ca for every colorful need you have. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you next Friday.
Thanks, Wanda.
Wanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wanda.
You're
Thank
so
you.
welcome. Bye.
Bye. Bye.